In the microcosm of a working-class home in Queens All in the Family, unfolds like an anthropological study of American consciousness, raw, unfiltered, and self-contradictory. The 4 episodes form a mosaic of social tension, hidden tenderness, and ideological fatigue. Beneath the sitcom's laughter lies a philosophical autopsy of 20th century America, dissecting the illusions of freedom, progress, and morality that defined a generation on the edge of transformation. It begins not with grand politics, but with an intimate tremor, Gloria's possible pregnancy. This domestic event becomes an existential dilemma, a quiet earthquake that shakes the family's moral architecture. Gloria and Michael's argument about having another child is more than a marital dispute. It is the echo of an entire civilization questioning its right to reproduce in a world suffocating under its own ideals. The couple debates not about love, but about responsibility, and their words carry the tension of an age obsessed with guilt toward the planet, toward poverty, toward the unborn. The conversation about the pill contraception and vasectomy transforms into a modern allegory: man versus woman, idealism versus biology, intellect versus instinct. The episode exposes the hypocrisy embedded in liberal morality, the man who advocates population control but flinches when sacrifice touches his own flesh. When Michael finally agrees to a vasectomy, his action becomes a ritual of self-castration, symbolic of the intellectual generation that preached revolution, yet feared the pain of change. His surgery, done in a clinical room that feels colder than any church, becomes the secular equivalent of confession and redemption. He wakes not sterile, but purified from hypocrisy. And yet the cruel irony of fate, Gloria's false alarm, reminds the viewer that morality is never rewarded cleanly. Every good intention leaves a scar. What follows is the Christmas dinner episode, a masterclass in moral confrontation. The dinner table, that sacred altar of American domesticity, becomes a battlefield for ideology. When David the draft dodger arrives, his presence tears apart the illusion of family harmony. Archie's outrage is not mere conservatism. It is the primal defense of order in a collapsing world. His patriotism is visceral, not intellectual. He clings to the flag as others cling to faith because it gives shape to chaos. Opposite him, Michael's liberalism mirrors the same rigidity, a dogma of compassion that often hides contempt. Between them stands Pinky Peterson, the man who has truly suffered, whose son died in Vietnam. His forgiveness toward David transcends politics. In his quiet voice, the series finds its moral truth that righteousness without empathy is meaningless. When Pinky says that both his son and the draft dodger acted from conscience, the entire ideological scaffolding of the show collapses into a simple universal truth. Pain is the only honest teacher. Archie's silence at the end of dinner is not defeat, it is awakening. He has encountered an idea too vast for his prejudice, the possibility that humanity matters more than obedience. The power of All in the Family lies in this. It allows its characters to be wrong, yet never lets them be small. Even Archie, loud and crude, carries a tragic dignity. He is the last believer in a world that has stopped believing in itself. His rage is not hatred, but fear. The fear of irrelevance, of losing the narrative of right and wrong. That same fear returns in the following episodes as comedy. When Archie and Edith miss their bus to New Jersey, the story plays like farce, but functions as existential satire. Their missed trip becomes a symbol of lost time, of the futility of trying to reach a future that no longer waits. The bus station sequence, filled with trivial chatter and innocent confusion, mirrors the absurdity of modern existence. People, weighed down by luggage they can't carry, waiting for transportation that never arrives. When they return home unexpectedly, catching their tenant Teresa in a romantic moment, the episode exposes the shifting morality of generations. The scandal of one age becomes the normalcy of the next. Edith's reaction, not outrage but compassion, reveals the quiet evolution of morality in ordinary hearts. She understands perhaps better than anyone that love, guilt, and decency are never pure. Her kindness is not ignorance, it is transcendence. Through her, the show proposes an ethics of humility, a morality that grows not from ideology, but from empathy. Archie, in contrast, remains bound by rules that once made sense, but no longer apply. His moral rigidity becomes both his strength and his curse. He is the ghost of the American patriarch, haunting a world that no longer needs him, but cannot yet let him go. The show treats him with a strange tenderness, mocking his ignorance while mourning his extinction. The chair episode turns this sentiment into pure metaphor. When Edith breaks Archie's favorite chair, it is not just furniture that collapses, it is the throne of the old order. The chair represents identity continuity and comfort in a world of instability. It is the seat from which Archie pronounces judgment where his authority still holds. When it has lost his masculinity and sense of history, disintegrate. His obsession with recovering the chair borders on the mythic, like a king searching for a lost relic of his power. But the show's genius is to turn this tragedy into absurdity. The chair ends up in an art gallery labeled a work of modern art, a commentary on post-industrial man's emotional dislocation. What intellectuals call symbolism, Archie calls the place I sit. His outrage at seeing his life turned into an aesthetic concept is the scream of the working class against a culture that exploits their pain for decoration. The art world worships authenticity but steals it from those who live it. The gallery scene becomes one of the most profound class dialogues ever written for television. The elite interpret what the poor endure. When the artist offers to buy the chair back for hundreds of dollars, Archie refuses, not because he doesn't want the money, but because he refuses to let meaning be bought. In that moment, he unknowingly performs a radical act of authenticity. His ignorance becomes wisdom. His stubbornness becomes integrity. He reclaims his narrative from a society that profits from his image. Sitting back in the chair at the end, Archie is not just a man resting. He is civilization itself, trying to survive its own irony. Each episode operates on this dual-level humor and despair, politics and poetry. Together, they paint a portrait of America caught between dream and decay. The family is the stage upon which the nation argues with itself. Gloria's idealism, Michael's intellectual vanity, Edith's faith, Archie's nostalgia, they are not merely personalities, but philosophical positions in constant collision. The genius of the writing is its refusal to grant victory to anyone. The liberal and the conservative, the believer and the skeptic, the feminist and the patriarch, all end up exposed, human and uncertain. The laughter of the audience becomes a nervous reflex, a defense against recognition. For behind every joke lies a mirror. All in the Family forces its viewers to confront their own contradictions, to see that love can coexist with prejudice, that ignorance can carry sincerity, and that progress often masks cruelty. The show was not just television. It was a national therapy session disguised as comedy. Watching it today feels like reading a moral diary of America. The entries are funny, but the handwriting trembles. The 4 episodes of Season 7 stand as the culmination of this philosophy. They move from the body to the spirit, from pregnancy to patriotism, from travel to belonging, from chair to soul. Each story begins with something mundane and ends with something metaphysical. What starts as a joke about sex ends as a reflection on legacy. What begins as a quarrel about a chair ends as a commentary on the commodification of human life. That is why All in the Family remains timeless. It never talks about issues. It talks about being human. It mocks the slogans of its time, freedom, family, values, progress, by showing how people stumble under their weight. It suggests that the only real morality is the ability to forgive, to laugh, and to stay in conversation even when no one wins. The bunkers, for all their dysfunction, never stop talking. And maybe that is the show's deepest hope, that as long as people argue, there is still connection, still democracy, still love. In the end, the sound of Archie and Edith singing "Those Were the Days" is no longer nostalgia. It is elegy, the song of a civilization, remembering what it used to believe in. The laughter fades, the chairs creak, the bus never comes, and the dinner table remains set for another argument that will never be resolved. That is America, weary, divided, and endlessly human. What makes All in the Family endure is not its politics, but its psychology. It captures the tremor beneath America's skin, the collective anxiety of a society that has outgrown its myths, but cannot live without them. Every argument in the Bunker household is an echo of a nation that once believed in simple certainties, the good war, the honest job, the obedient wife, and now trembles in the fog of self-awareness. Archie Bunker becomes the ghost of that lost faith, haunting the living room of modernity. His laughter masks despair, his bigotry masks fear. He is not evil, he is exhausted. The world he trusted has changed the rules while he was busy surviving. That is why he clings to his chair, his beer, his God, his flag, not out of arrogance, but out of grief. The show never absolves him, but it never demonizes him either. It treats him as the last believer in a cynical age, a relic who still thinks that decency is a matter of obedience, and that love must always sound like authority. His tragedy is that the world has shifted from obedience to interpretation. Truth once fixed has become negotiable. In such a world, Archie's certainty becomes a form of innocence, and innocence, when cornered, turns violent. Yet even his outbursts are framed with pity. The writers allow him to fail publicly and learn privately because America itself must learn that way through embarrassment, not enlightenment. In contrast, Michael represents the opposite pathology, intellect detached from empathy. He is the modern moralist, endlessly analyzing but rarely understanding. His ideals about justice, environment, and equality sound noble but hollow when filtered through ego. He sees the world as a problem to be solved, not a home to be lived in. When he preaches about overpopulation while failing to console his wife, his words expose a generation that confuses awareness with virtue. His eventual vasectomy, demanded by logic but performed in fear, is not liberation but surrender. It is a grotesque comedy of modern ethics, a man mutilating himself to prove moral superiority. The show presents this without sermonizing, using absurd humor to expose the cruelty of abstract idealism. Michael's nervous jokes in the clinic, the doctor's casual cheerfulness, the cold efficiency of the procedure, all form a portrait of civilization, sterilizing itself in the name of progress. It is not just his body that becomes barren, it is his philosophy. When Gloria learns she is not pregnant, the tragedy becomes absurd. The moral calculus collapses under the weight of coincidence. The scene that follows their reconciliation is not about right or wrong, but about endurance. In that silence between them lies the essence of marriage, the ability to outlast one's own principles. Edith, meanwhile, drifts through these storms like the embodiment of quiet grace. She is the moral heartbeat of the series, the figure of unlearned wisdom. Her kindness is not naivety, but courage. In a world obsessed with being right, she chooses to be gentle. She listens when others shout, forgives when others debate. She represents the only kind of faith that can survive modernity, a faith in people, not ideas. When she tells Gloria that guilt doesn't erase love, she articulates the show's theology that redemption belongs to those who keep loving even when they don't understand why. Edith's laughter, high and tremulous, is the sound of mercy surviving cynicism. It is this mercy that redeems all in the family from bitterness. Without her, the show would collapse into despair. With her, it becomes a form of prayer disguised as sitcom. The Christmas dinner episode makes this clearer than ever. When the draft dodger arrives, he brings with him the ghosts of a wounded nation. The Vietnam War hovers over the table like a curse. Archie's fury, Pinky's grief, and David's guilt merge into a single collective wound. America divided not between left and right, but between the living and the dead. The dinner becomes a ritual of mourning disguised as celebration. Each plate of food is communion, each toast a eulogy. When Pinky, whose son died in the war, forgives the young man who refused to fight it, is not sentimentality, it is resurrection. His forgiveness resurrects decency in a room suffocating with righteousness. The moment is quietly revolutionary, a conservative father forgiving the embodiment of everything he should hate. That is not politics, it is grace. And grace in this show always arrives uninvited in the pauses, in the sighs, and the trembling silence after laughter. When Archie finally sits again, unable to eat, staring into space as the carolers sing outside, he is not just a man confused by youth. He is the country itself, unsure of what it believes in anymore. The next episodes expand this idea through absurd domesticity. Missing the bus, losing the chair, these are not coincidences. They are parables. The bus episode shows time as the ultimate thief. Archie and Edith miss their ride not because of fate, but because of distraction, because they are busy being human. The missed bus becomes a symbol for missed eras, missed conversations, missed compassion. They are trapped between memory and mobility, wanting to move forward, but always returning home. When they come back and find Teresa with her boyfriend, the generational gap is not scandal, but revelation. Edith's empathy toward the young woman suggests that love, though forbidden, remains sacred if it is sincere. She sees in Teresa the same loneliness she once carried as a young bride under Archie's shadow. The younger generation's freedom doesn't offend her, it touches her. The difference between her and Archie is not intelligence, but empathy. She understands that morality must breathe, must evolve, while Archie fears that evolution means erasure. That is why the chair episode hits with such symbolic force. When Edith breaks it, she unintentionally commits the most profound act of rebellion possible. She disrupts the illusion of permanence. The chair is not just a prop, it is a relic. It holds the weight of habit, the imprint of control, the smell of certainty. When it breaks, so does Archie's illusion of authority. His obsession with retrieving it mirrors society's obsession with nostalgia, the desperate desire to possess the past, even when it no longer fits. The art gallery scene crystallizes this conflict into cultural satire. Modern art, with its pretentious detachment, transforms the object of real life into an abstraction, stripping it of utility to claim meaning. Archie's rage is the rage of authenticity against appropriation. The artist calls it commentary. Archie calls it theft. Both are right, and that is what makes the scene brilliant. It is not about art versus ignorance. It is about ownership of meaning. The gallery's offer of money turns the moral question into an economic one. Can sentiment be sold? Archie's refusal to sell the chair is his only act of moral purity in a corrupt world. It is his unspoken declaration that value lies in memory, not market. The laughter that follows is not mockery, it is catharsis. He sits back down triumphant, yet broken, the last man of a dying civilization, sitting on the last relic of his own relevance. In that chair sits the entire paradox of American material comfort, built on emotional poverty freedom, haunted by fear progress pursued at the cost of peace. All in the Family does not solve these contradictions, it sanctifies them. It teaches that being American means arguing forever, loving clumsily, and laughing to survive. The show's ending theme, "Those Were the Days," is not nostalgia, but prophecy. It tells us that every generation will look backward for meaning because the present is always too chaotic to love. Watching it today, decades later, one feels the same ache, the realization that the problems of the bunkers never vanished. They merely changed costumes. The living room has become digital, the arguments online, the ideologies louder but emptier. Yet somewhere in every home, another Archie sits on another chair, convinced that the world has gone mad, while the world outside believes the same about him. That is why All in the Family remains eternal. It is not about a time that was. It is about a condition that is. It is America's conscience laughing at itself, unsure whether the joke is over or just beginning.